Before moving on to Season 2 of Teen Titans, I want to take a step back and look at Episode 5 of Season 1 again, the episode where Cyborg gets taken by Fix-It. I want to talk about this because many people have left comments that are pretty critical of my interpretation of that episode, and those criticisms connected with me. Basically, I think I misunderstood what the episode was trying to show us. While the episodes previous to Episode 5 were attempting to display some sort of change in character that results in a different dynamic between the Titans, Episode 5 itself isn't as much concerned with that. Instead, it's focused on a change within Cyborg that, though it does have some sort of impact on his relationships, has a much larger impact on himself, and thus happens to have an impact on some people around him. This episode is meant to get one major point across. Sometimes Cyborg wishes that he didn't have his robotic body, or at the least he is heavily inconvenienced by his robotic body. So when Fix-It traps him and is going to make him completely robotic, it's what Cyborg would fear the most, to lose his human side. While I do think that the mumbo sections of this episode are unfortunately quite disconnected from this central conflict, the show does a pretty good job of exploring this conflict in and of itself. In the beginning, Cyborg's reception to this kid with a prosthetic arm is lukewarm at best, but by the end, Cyborg is encouraging and embracing this connection between them. All of this is to say that I didn't give the episode nearly enough credit because I misunderstood it on a fundamental level, when in reality it really does show us quite a bit about Cyborg's character, about his deepest fears, and about how he's going to work through those fears. I want to thank all the people who took the time to give me their interpretation of the episode. Part of the fun with these long series I do is that we can discuss our differences in opinion or understanding and hopefully come to an overall greater appreciation of the show being discussed. Now, with this in mind, one way that I think Episode 5 could have improved is by showing us at least a bit about how Cyborg received his robotic half. This isn't because I think we necessarily need to see that for this episode to make sense or anything like that, but because it could have led to this episode's overarching narrative having a greater impact. Just imagine if, instead of some of these scenes being with Mumbo, we saw a bit of Cyborg when he was younger getting used to his robotic half, trying to understand it and sometimes hating it. Then this moment when he talks to a younger person would also be him talking to his past self, telling himself that his robotic body is fine even if it's sometimes obnoxious or an inconvenience. So with that out of the way, let's move on to Season 2. And Season 2 starts off great, because How Long is Forever delivers on an interesting premise in an emotionally impactful and exciting manner. The first great thing about this episode is how it's structured thematically. Everything comes back to time. Robin believes that they will be friends forever. Starfire is concerned about the way they treat one another and how that could affect their relationships in the future, and Warp has come from the future to steal this clock. While the way these themes tie together is by no means subtle, it creates a density of meaning that is established early on in the episode and then capitalized on as the episode continues. By seeing the Titans' future selves, we are able to see how their greatest weaknesses would affect them in the long term if their friendship fell apart. The robotic part of Cyborg's body stops him from doing anything at all beyond roaming around the tower. His battery has effectively always run out. Beast Boy was unable to do the whole solo hero thing, despite the pride he has exhibited in previous episodes, and he's now let himself become a circus attraction. Just as he so often wanted to be the center of attention in previous episodes, he's the center of attention now, but in a way that is entirely negative and extremely damaging to himself. Raven, meanwhile, is completely isolated from everything, even from the outside world. She's entirely alone. Robin, on the other hand, has become more like Slade, or at least that seems to be what the episode is hinting at, with how these clock parts come in and just the overall layout of Robin's new lair. Both of these things establish connections with Slade's own living space in Season 1, so actually the show is basically doing what I'd hoped it would do in Season 1. An extension of this is that Robin works on his own now. He doesn't have teammates. However, even after all this, the friends clearly want to be together, as they've never gotten rid of these devices before that let them know when they need to help each other out, when they need to stop crime or some bad person who's going to hurt people. So when Robin calls them to action, they come, even after it seems that they've so completely drifted apart. What a powerful way to sell their friendship, to show how much they care about one another. They didn't need to keep these devices, they didn't need to come, and this is an amazing way of also showing how Starfire is at the center of this group, that she's integral to them getting along with one another in the long term. After all, without her there, this happens, but when she appears, they come back together. It's the best episode so far, and I've heard many say in the comments that this is their favorite episode or one of their favorite episodes in the whole series, and I can definitely see why. And the next episode is also really good and does a similarly fantastic job of tying together its themes with pretty much all elements of its plot, which results in what is easily the best Beast Boy-centric episode yet. In this episode, Beast Boy's friends are all busy or just doing their own things, so they don't have time or simply don't want to do something with him at that particular moment. This makes Beast Boy a bit upset, so he decides to go out, and when he's out, he sees these ladies and tries to hit on them. After hitting on them is unsuccessful, to say the least, he tries to turn into a dog because, ladies like dogs. But they reject him, and instead of attracting the attention he wanted, he attracts the attention of this big old baby man-child guy named Soto who mistakes Beast Boy for his dog. This episode works really well as a cautionary tale. Despite how innocent it may seem, Beast Boy was attempting to manipulate these girls into giving him attention, and by doing so, he only ended up getting attention from someone abusive and psychotic, and he enters into a relationship that is hard to escape from. The lesson seems to be that one shouldn't try to use tricks to manipulate people into spending time with them, that they shouldn't be disingenuous in order to be able to engage with someone else, because that will likely only get you attention from someone who you really don't want to spend time with in the long term. In addition to this, the fact that this episode follows How Long Is Forever is great. After all, we've just seen a version of Beast Boy who wants this attention and gets it, but it hurts him a lot. And this shows how this is a fundamental character flaw that he needs to work through. On top of all this is the fact that it's a fun, well-directed episode. I particularly like how the scenes where the Titans are trying to trap Soto's dog are handled. They're dynamic, entertaining, funny, and just a great time overall. In fact, this whole episode is a great time. Fortunately, this show keeps up with the solid episodes and delivers another one with episode 3. Terra. As one might expect, this episode focuses on Terra, and it manages to establish the foundational elements of her character in a short period of time. First off, Terra is incredibly insecure, but also very quick to grow close to people and expect lots from them. She immediately makes herself at home in the Titan's Tower and then very quickly expects Beast Boy to keep the secret that her powers aren't completely under control. Yet this makes sense, as her powers have resulted in terrible things happening wherever she goes, and she hasn't had a home for a long time. So when that's provided to her, when she sees that she might be able to have this and have friends, why wouldn't she aggressively jump at the opportunity? Why wouldn't she quickly accept this kindness and also take it as seriously as possible? Secondly, the episode's imagery is on point. Terra and Beast Boy throw stones across this pond together and gain an important bond while doing so. Then, at the end of the episode, Beast Boy throws a stone and the water ripples through the reflection of Titan's Tower, a powerful way of showing that Terra and her abilities are going to have an incredible impact on the Titans later in the season. Thirdly, Terra is put in the worst possible situation in this episode, with Slade purposefully choosing to attack a mine and then provoking her. We're never told that this is why Slade chose this place, but it's pretty clear, and allowing the audience to piece this together themselves is gratifying, to say the least. Furthermore, it allows us to see just how important Beast Boy's relationship with her has become despite how little time they've known each other, because he's able to help calm her down. He believes in her. All she needs is that. Someone to trust her and help her control her powers and who won't in any way betray her trust. Unfortunately, she's as quick to distrust people as she is to trust them, and when Robin mentions that she has trouble controlling her powers, she assumes Beast Boy has betrayed her trust. Of course, from an outside perspective, it's clear that this would be obvious. How wouldn't anyone have noticed what was going on? But Terra doesn't see it that way, and that's just how insecure she is. All of this is to say that although I'm sure her actions in this episode and in later episodes are frustrating to some viewers, the writers did a really good job of getting her actions to make sense and to be consistent. The writers establish that she's insecure, then show how damaging that insecurity can be. Really, that's what her character is about throughout the show. A battle with herself, a battle between the side that loathes herself so much that she can't believe anyone else would ever care for her or trust her, and the side that believes in herself and those around her. Of course, after she leaves, there are a number of episodes that don't involve her. In this case, I think it makes sense to take a break from the overarching plot of this season because having a gap between when she leaves and when she returns is necessary, considering that she's meant to have been trained within that time and to have undergone a major change in character. The next episode, while in my opinion not quite as strong as the previous 3, is really sweet. In it, Cyborg starts off believing that his robotic parts determine how strong he can be, but in the end he realizes that he can push past those supposed limits because he's still human. While this is an internal struggle within Cyborg, the show uses an external conflict to amplify his emotions and to give more weight to his change. Atlas, the main villain of this episode, is here to reflect Cyborg's robotic half, while Atlas's mechanic reflects Cyborg's human half. Atlas shows us what Cyborg could be like if he rejected or mistreated his human half, if he decided that it wasn't all that important, and what happens is that, well, Atlas loses. He needs to accept and respect the human in order to win, but he doesn't, while Cyborg does. In addition to this, Cyborg's allies trust him deeply, are willing to put their freedom on the line for him, so he doesn't just have his human parts. He has his friends too, those humans who are there for him, rooting for him, and believe in him. Episode 5 continues this string of back-to-back good episodes with the introduction of Control Freak. Now, I don't recall ever seeing this guy as a kid, but I'm disappointed that I missed him because he's awesome. Even just from his introduction, I can tell that much. I love how he's clearly motivated by petty things and how he wants to be the Titan's nemesis. 2 things that make it quite clear how bloated his ego and sense of self-importance are. In line with this is how he prances around when he makes things come to life with his remote. Everything about him oozes personality. He's just a fabulous boy. I'm definitely excited to see more of him in the upcoming seasons, and I hope that he takes on a role of greater importance. Beyond this episode focuses on how Raven represses her emotions and on the way that this repression can cause bad things to happen. On a more symbolic level, this episode is about the fact that denying our emotions generally isn't the best option and can lead to people around us, the people we care about, being hurt in the long run. The show has a fun way of going about this, as Raven accidentally whips up a whole bunch of these evil creatures from a monster movie using her abilities, and the show takes on a huge tonal shift and really commits to the scary movie vibe. When a show is sometimes episodic like this one, I tend to enjoy when it commits to different styles of narrative or to different genres across episodes. It helps make each episode unique so that plots don't blend together or become too samey, which in turn helps justify a narrative structure that often focuses on short stories that are loosely connected, rather than a consistent overarching narrative. Unfortunately, episode 6 is the first episode I'm not particularly fond of. In it, this girl Kidden really wants to go out on a date with Robin, and unless he does, her dad is going to try and destroy the entire city. My main problem with this episode is that, although the premise is so ridiculous that it starts off quite funny, we are essentially seeing the same joke over and over again. Basically, Kidden will say something to Robin, Starfire will get enraged, and Robin will get uncomfortable. About halfway through the episode, this got really stale to me. Now, this wasn't as big a problem as it could have been because there are sections with Beast Boy, Robin, and Cyborg that barely focus on these jokes, but this episode still hits that same joke too many times. This one also has moments where it commits to a particular genre, kind of like the last one. In this case, that's a romance flick though, and that commitment does add some humor to the whole situation. The next episode similarly commits to a particular narrative format, that being a fairy tale. In this, Starfire starts mutating into an ugly creature, getting growths on her head that look like something out of Fooly Cooly and becoming almost Sasquatch-like in appearance. It's a very clear-cut metaphor for puberty. After her transformation has begun, she runs away from her friends and encounters this evil individual who at first looks very pretty, but then later reveals the uglier side of herself when she goes to eat Starfire. Now, I'm not sure if the writers first decided on the narrative framework of this episode and then wrote out the plot from there, or if they came up with the plot first and then decided on the narrative framework, but either way, it makes a lot of sense to format this as a fairy tale. After all, it's a pretty typical plot that's found in those sorts of stories, particularly those that were made as moral tales for young girls, so it makes quite a bit of sense to open up with this storybook getting cracked open and with the narrator talking to us. Again, I appreciate how thoroughly the team is committing to a different style of storytelling here. It really gives off the sense that they're having a lot of fun experimenting, and even if I had some gripes with the previous episode, it certainly keeps the viewer on their toes. One unfortunate side effect of this narrative structure, however, at least for an older viewer, is that every beat of the story is very predictable. Honestly though, if you're alright with a 20-minute long episode of television being a bit predictable, there isn't that much to complain about here. We're offered some solid development for Starfire, we get to see Titans fighting a villain from a previous episode, and we get to see how far the Titans are willing to go to help their friend. It's an entertaining episode of television overall, and another good episode in Season 2, even if it's not my favorite of the bunch. And next up is another Terra episode, but I think I'll be saving that for next time. Once again, I want to thank everyone for watching and for keeping up with this series. It's greatly appreciated, and my channel has seen an insane amount of growth from this series. And, that's all because you have been watching and you're commenting and engaging with it so much, and I appreciate that a lot. I also specifically want to thank my patrons over on patreon.com. From the bottom of my heart, I'm just so thankful for them and what they give me. I hope you have an awesome day. Bye-bye.